What interesting trends and changes in mobility are you seeing driven by the current COVID-19 pandemic? Do you see these trends persisting to create significant changes in personal and freight mobility?
Well, I think we can see changes across three sectors. Let us start with consumers, consumer habits. I think we're going to see a lot of change there, primarily driven by, first of all, this whole need for more privacy, social distancing, separation, person to person, and so on. This in turn has had the implications on people becoming a lot more digital. I mean, this whole interview and conversation is happening through digital and virtual media. We're getting people to have more flexible work practices. Work from home has become a lot more common, and of course, there's a lot of safety issues related to the workplace. We are redefining the kinds of things that have to be done in workplaces related to safety. So these are all going to be part of, shall I say, the human elements of dealing with post-COVID in the industry. Industries themselves have to do a lot of stuff. I think to start with, they've all been very, very badly ravaged by the financial implications, economic implications of the downturn. So the first priority for most industries is to conserve cash, make sure that the amount of cash they have can take them through the year. There is a certain set of imperatives that we can't give up on, things like obligations for climate change, and this means that there is going to be a certain amount of investment that's going to be needed, even as you conserve cash. I think we're going to see a lot more consolidation happen in industries because clearly in many sectors we're going to see capacity far more than demand. And so there's going to be resizing or consolidation. And there's going to be a lot of stuff on the supply chain, and we will talk more about that. I think we will also see changes in the way people are mobile. I think we're beginning to see concerns about mass transit, being traveling in crowded zones, even going into crowded restaurants. So we're going to see changes related to how mobility and transportation is going to be handled, maybe more stuff being delivered to the home rather than going out to do shopping. So we will see significant changes across the three headings of consumers and people, industries, and the way we will be moving in transportation.
You have contributed a series of 5 articles to one of India's leading newspapers, The Hindu, about the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the mobility industry. Can you summarize some of the key messages you conveyed?
So it goes back from looking at the changes post-COVID. So here's what I think industries will have to do. And again, I'll break it up into what industries would do, how we would deal with supply chain, and how we would deal with the societal implications of working with industry. I think the first challenge for industries is to make sure that they can restart in a safe working environment. Factories by nature tend to put a lot of people together. People arrive in factories in crowded buses. So every element of taking care of providing a safe environment, both in the travel to industries and working in the industries, is an important aspect. The second near-term concern is going to be for industries to look at how do you predict demand recovery. Uh, Today, we don't know how quickly demand is going to come back, and it is extremely variable. Certain parts of the country, certain parts of the world are beginning to see economic activity restart, and others are lagging. So there's going to be very, very spotty and unpredictable re-emergence of demand. This is true for both passenger and freight demand. Then there is going to be, how our industry is going to manage staying afloat. We talked about cash management and cash conservation. All industries today have to really make sure that they have ample credit lines to make sure that they stay liquid for a very, very difficult period of time. Uh, Industries have to look at if they want to deal with the imperatives that they have to be addressing, regulatory imperatives, the new business imperatives, they have to be ready for investment. And increasingly, I think cash-strapped industries will start to look at JVs, mergers, cooperation to pool funds to be able to undertake this. Industries are also going to rethink how retailing is done. If you take the automotive industry, I think very soon we may find an alternative to the traditional concept of automotive dealers. We take retail customers and retail products. We're already beginning to see the change of fewer people going to stores and more people getting things delivered to the house. This has huge implications on both logistics and supply chain. Uh, and finally, of course, I think one thing is clear, even though this has been a brutally devastating economic impact because of COVID, the conviction seems to be that going forward, we will still have to make some fundamental investments in environmental technologies and combating climate change. So I think this is it's not an investment that's going to go away or an imperative that's going to go away. On supply chains, I think, first of all, a lot of what we said about industries will apply to supply chains. The first order of business is to survive. Um, and then not only survive, but also deal with the near term mismatches in terms of availability of labor, availability of logistics, and start getting the business started. I think we have to agree to confront this whole issue globally that not just COVID, but even before COVID, we were beginning to see a huge trend towards nationalism and creation of new borders. You know, NAFTA as a trade agreement was scrapped and it has now been replaced by the USMCA. Brexit is causing the UK to leave the European Union. And each time this happens, there are new borders, and new borders means a huge bottleneck for logistics. So we have the supply chains have to deal with this. Yossi Sheffi, who's closely associated with MISI, has for some time now been talking about the importance of resilience of supply chain. And COVID, if anything, has brought to the surface the criticality of managing supply chains to be resilient. We've always been managing supply chains to be globally optimized and efficient, perhaps assuming that the resilience was not necessary. Well, these are unpredictable times, so resilience is going to be necessary. And this may mean that there are going to be more near-shore manufacturing sites, less very complex long-distance supply chains, and this will have a huge impact on both the architecture of supply chains and the logistics that go with it. And of course, all of this has to deal with this whole business of societal change and how people are now going to live their lives. A crucial element could be how people will continue to look at cities anymore. Increasingly, as you bring people together and you crowd people into cities, you then automatically have crowded apartments, crowded stores, crowded mass transit. What happens in a world where people are concerned about these kinds of close packing individuals? Does this mean that we will again find people wanting to move back to suburbs? Will this be the reversal of a trend of urbanization causing people to move back to suburbs, particularly when you can work from home and do a lot more stuff digitally? So there could be a lot of changes fundamentally in terms of how people will arrange their lives. All of these will have significant effects on supply chain and logistics.
What are some of your recommendations for South Asian automotive manufacturers in the face of these current challenges and trends?
I think when I talk to CEOs around the world, and this is, of course, also true for what South Asian and Southeast Asian automakers will have to deal with. Their current priority is to make sure they survive these next 3-4 months, making sure that they can therefore execute whatever remaining strategy they can. So the first is they have to manage the cash, acquire adequate credit lines, and make sure that they are going to stay afloat. They have to expend a huge amount of effort to understand how they restart business in a safe way. We're already beginning to see spikes in infection and cases of confirmation of positive COVID as people start to come out. So as you start to reopen the economy and as you start and you restart operations, one's going to have to be extremely careful in the safety protocols and the shall I say, the courtesy protocols we will have to make sure people are able to operate in a safe way. And in the near term, at least for the next 6 months to a year, we must expect very, very unpredictable dynamic schedules. This is going to test our industries and supply chains like never before. There is never going to be a clear, predictable demand growth in any part of the world. And when you're dealing with multiple parts of the world, you've got a very chaotic planning scenario for demand and an equally complex planning scenario for supply chain. Certain areas of the world where your supply chains are already well established may be coming up to speed faster than others. And today you have a non-uniform restart capability, and this is going to also have a huge complication on the supply chain. So all of this is immediate near-term activity. In the midterm activity, I think companies will have to look at re-examining their product portfolio. We've already seen examples of this. For example, if people are afraid of traveling close together, Uber Pool essentially puts three people in a car together. And maybe going in the future, people would say, I don't want to be in a car with three people. So Uber has now acquired Lime as an e-scooter company. So product portfolios of industries and companies have to be re-examined, and maybe some adjustments have to be made. We've talked about the resilience of supply chains, but also I think we have to look at tools. One thing that COVID has taught us is there's a huge opportunity with digital tools to enhance productivity. One of the major platforms in supply chain and logistics to improve productivity has been the so-called Industry 4.0 that has been made famous by the German industry. But there are manifestations of this in Japan, and Korea, US, Asia as well. And this essentially means that we deal with production as a large, complex cyber-physical system, and we exploit all of the capabilities of the cyber systems to enhance what we're doing with physical systems to make production a whole lot better orchestrated. Long term, I think we're going to have to do better partnering. I think the problems are becoming too complex and too large for any single company to do alone. The partnering may take the form of large mergers, acquisitions, JVs, cooperation agreements, or it could be small entities that dynamically choose to coordinate and partner with like-minded or complementary entities, and therefore be more nimble in terms of what they deliver. We've talked about re-examining and re-architecting the product strategy, but equally one has to look at reallocating and redistributing the production strategy. If there are going to be more nearshore locations, your production footprint has to change, and along with it, maybe technologies. I think we are going to see an acceleration of the induction of smart robots, whether it's in logistics, warehouse operations, whether it's on the plant floor. All of this driven by the fact that employing a lot of people is going to create safety and health concerns. Now, there are larger implications of robots replacing human beings, but in the first order of things, I can imagine that industries will have a huge imperative to add robots and automation. And finally, retail strategies have to be rethought. We're already seeing virtual auto dealerships. We are seeing digital representations of products and features that are used to convey marketing messages to people. And we've already talked about, you don't go to stores very much anymore. You expect things to be delivered to you with digital tools. So I think these are all going to be, the near-term, mid-term, and the long-term imperatives that Southeast Asian auto companies would have to